When I recall the pre-war years, a rather obvious picture comes to mind. After all, no one prevented the United States from investing in the Russian economy, building businesses, creating jobs, and making money. But this almost never happened. It's easy to explain. Imagine you run a large American corporation and are choosing an investment direction. You're looking at Russia, a country with a population of about 140 million, approximately 40 million of whom are pensioners. And right next to it is China, with a population of over 1 billion. Where would it be more logical to invest in such a situation? Of course, even China has plenty of poor people, and plenty of elderly people without any pensions. But the potential demand for goods, the market size, and the growth prospects in China and Russia are incomparable. Therefore, Americans could have invested in Russia, but they were extremely reluctant to do so. In fact, if you look at who actually invested in the Russian economy, it's a rather amusing story. Putin is currently trying to scare the West by claiming that Russia could seize the assets of foreign companies if the West doesn't return Russia's frozen reserves. In response, data is being published on which countries have invested in Russia. And the top spot isn't occupied by the US or Canada, but by Cyprus. This sounds impressive until you realize that behind the Cypriot investments are the Russian companies themselves. They simply withdrew the money, whitewashed it there, and then returned it as foreign, hoping to reduce the risk of possible confiscation. Essentially, no one really wanted to invest in Russia. There were attempts to build automobile factories. Ford, Volkswagen. Yes, these projects existed, although they constantly ran into problems. Ford's plant in Sevolosk is perhaps the most famous. But with rare exceptions, major players weren't eager to enter Russia. And even now, there's simply no reason to rush. I especially find it funny to hear talk about how the US should supposedly be interested in Arctic oil or rare earth elements in Russia. These ideas are so empty that it's embarrassing to even discuss them. Arctic oil is a joke. The further north you go, the more expensive the production. That's clear to everyone. Yes, there are significant reserves on the Laptev Sea shelf, and Rosneft once had ambitious plans to develop them. But even before the war, the company announced it was postponing all these projects for at least 5 years. The costs were so enormous that even geological exploration wouldn't pay off. It's akin to a white elephant. It consumes money without restraint, but produces zero results. It's the same story with rare earth metals. Yes, there are deposits, one on the Kola Peninsula, the other somewhere far beyond Norilsk, closer to Kamchatka, hundreds of kilometers from the coast of the Arctic Ocean. These are harsh, uninhabited territories, without even a road. To begin production, they would have to build infrastructure from scratch, spending colossal amounts of money. And all this for a market completely controlled by China, which accounts for about 70% of global production. Should Russia or the US even attempt to seriously enter this sector, China would simply drive prices down, and any project would become unprofitable. Therefore, talk of a grand prospect is simply propaganda rhetoric. When Trump was shown the insane Bering Strait tunnel project, even he was surprised. What exactly would we be shipping through it? Now some Russian officials are claiming that this hypothetical tunnel will facilitate the flow of goods between China and the US. But this is a completely absurd idea. Shipping cargo by sea is easier, faster, and cheaper than hauling it across the icy wasteland of Alaska and then crossing Canada. But this is precisely the level of discussion we hear. There are no real projects, no prospects. But they want to create the appearance of a winning combination. That's how I see it. A lot of big talk, little substance, and almost no real opportunities for serious foreign investment.